to go to young Yeshivah. Grandfather, yes. Can I give you this? Once.
Rabbi, we're ready for you.
So, check your WhatsApp, see if you got it. Testing, okay, good. Okay, so let me make the usual announcement. All of you who have phones here tonight, please take them out and open them up to the Young Yeshiva chat. Don't put them away, don't put them on silent, take them all out. I wanted to show something on a screen because it's visual. Over the years I learnt that boys learn by visual. And a big screen would be very helpful for a lot of fevra in this room, I happen to know. And but that wasn't able to be arranged. So I'm still an old-fashioned guy because I thought, how am I going to get this up there as a visual thing? So I remember that Morty Engel used to, for Friendship Circle, used to have these massive A4 pages, like that sign there, like a Beth Rivka, but even bigger, you know, on paper. He told me I could go down and photocopy it at Office Works. Well, you know, I didn't think that was such a good idea. I mentioned it to my wife, and my wife said, you know, why don't you WhatsApp it out? There you go. So you need to have to be technological. Anyway, so as you know, that we cannot learn all sections of Torah tonight, because the Shulchan Aruch says, B'kurei Hashem Yesharim Mesamchei Lev, the mitzvahs of Hashem make us happy. So if in any way, shape or form this bores you or makes you sad, so that's good on this particular occasion. Anyway, I had various stories. I'm only going to be reading, just putting it together, various stories from the Gemara and various facts from the Gemara and from the Midrash on the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. I usually do the stories and things like that for kids. Now, I didn't know a title, and Akiva, who's very good at making titles, Akiva Aaron, wrote the road to destruction, something like that. And so that got me thinking, why not put it all in chronological order and do it that way? And then I think it's better, for sure. Maybe more memorable. In any event, I'm going to work off this handout that you have, and I'm going to refer back to the thing on your WhatsApp, which tells you exactly the year when it happened. That document I didn't want to give out, that chronology of events, because I'm still working on it. I've been working on it for a few years. And you'll see some numbers there. I started to make footnotes to show exactly where all those things come from. And I got stuck on one, which I thought would be very easy, but it's not so easy to get it. It's very long, and I couldn't be bothered doing it. I'm trying to work out how to do it briefly, and I'll move on to the rest. Anyway, that's all by way of introduction. So let's get stuck into it. So here is what the Gemara says about when and exactly what happened when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Chorav habayis barishoina, the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, diksiv, because the pasuk says, "Uvachodesh hachamishi b'shiva lachodesh hi shnas tesha esrei shana lemelech Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel." So the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in the 7th of the month of the 5th month of Chodesh Av, which was the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. Now Nebuchadnezzar began to reign in 3319, and therefore 19 years later is 3338, which is the time when that's the year that it's Makubal that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. 3338, to give you an idea in our times, 3338 would be corresponding to 423 BCE. So whenever you want to do dates in the BCE, I'm just giving you a little hint that I worked out. The last two numbers have to add up to 11 or finish with a 1. So 3338 or 423, the 8 and the 3 makes out to 11. Just keep that in mind sometimes when you want to do it. You would think that it's even years, but it's not. I'm not going to go into why. So at that time, on the 7th month, born was Radin, Rab Tabachim, Eved Melech Bavel, Yerushalayim, Vayisrov as Beis Hashem. So there was Radin, who was the chief executioner, and he was the general of Nebuchadnezzar's army, came to Yerushalayim and he burnt the Beis Hamikdash. But then the Gemara says, the 7th, you say the 7th, it's a pasuk, Ochsiv, but it's written in Yirmiyahu, where a parallel description of what happened. There it's written, it was in the 10th of the 5th month, so there it says that it happened on the 10th. So Zog the Gemara, Betanya, so we learned in the Braisa, it's impossible to say that it happened on the 7th, because it says elsewhere it happened on the 10th, so you can't say the 7th. But on the other hand, you can't say it happened on the 10th, because it's already said on the 9th. And notice, we haven't even mentioned Tisha B'Av just yet. Okay, so how does this work out? So here is what actually happened in the year 3338, 423 BCE. On the 7th of Av, the Goyim broke into the Beis Hamikdash. And they ate there and they wreaked havoc there on the 7th and on the 8th of Av. And on the 9th of Av, as it was getting towards dark, towards evening, they lit the fire, which eventually caused that it continued to fire and light the whole night of the evening of the 10th and burnt the whole 10th. Shenema, as the Pasuk says, woe to us that the day is ending, because the shadows of the evening are beginning to turn. So therefore what has happened is, they broke into the Beis Hamikdash the 7th and did whatever they did there. I mean, they broke, they vandalized, they stole things. And I'm sure they did worse as well, as we'll soon see. And at the 9th, towards the evening, so it's on Tisha B'Av, they started a fire, so the Tisha B'Av in the afternoon, and that fire went the whole next day till it burnt the whole Beis Hamikdash down. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Ilmali ha'yisi b'yisa hadoer, Rabbi Yochanan, Stam Rabbi Yochanan, the Gemara is Rabbi Yochanan ben Nachot, so he is first generation of Amoraim. V'hainu Doma Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan in Israel. V'hainu Doma Rabbi Yochanan, Ilmali, which I've got to give you a year, if we're doing years, so we're talking, around about, from about 120 and on 150, somewhere around that. Rabbi Yochanan said, Ilmali ha'yisbei seder, so if I would have been there in that generation, loy kavativ elaba asiri, I would have only established the fast day on the 10th. Mitnei shuru b'shul heichel, b'in Israel, because that's when most of the Beis Hamikdash was burnt. But the Rabbanon didn't agree, they said the 9th. Why? The beginning of a punishment is the worst time of the punishment. Because since Hashem has granted the enemy ability to achieve what he wants to achieve, to start achieving, so that's already the worst element. The rest is just a continuation. So therefore they established it on the 9th when the fire began. And how do you know that the same thing happened in the second Beis Hamikdash? It happened on the 9th of Minolam. From where do we know this? The Tanya, because it's taught in the Brayso, Megalgal and Skus l'yom Zakai, v'choyvel l'yom Chayav. Good events happen on a day which is destined for good events, and negative events happen on a day which is negative. Amru, so they said, "K'shachara Beis Hamikdash b'Rishono oisa yom erev Tisha B'av hoya." So that's the answer. So the answer is that was a day which was originally way back in the Midbar was already a bad day, because that's when the Meraglim came back and they got decreed to stay 40 years. So this is a day that's set for negative things to happen. It's a negative day and the negative things happen. In other words, it's basically a svara. It's a logic. Amru, so the Chachamim said, when the Beis Hamikdash was first destroyed, it was Erev Tisha B'Av, was U'Mitzvah Shabbos Hoya, it was a Mitzvah Shabbos, so Mitzvah Shvius Hoya, it was just after Shemitah, U'Mishmarasa Shel Yehoyarov Hoya, and it was the Mishmar of Yehoyariv, who is one of the 24 family groups of Kehanim in which the Beis Hamikdash was done. The work in the Beis Hamikdash was done by rotation of 24 Kehanim families over 24 weeks. So they would go 1 week one, 1 week the other, 1 week the other, and then after 24 weeks it would start again. Yehoyariv happened to be the first of the list. So it was in his week. V'halavim hayu ayminim Shiur v'ayminim al duchanan. The Vim was singing at that particular moment on their platform. What were they singing? And Hashem brought against them their avedas, and their badness. Yatzmisam caused them to be cut away. They weren't able to finish that statement that Hashem Elokeinu was going to cut them off until the Goyim came in and destroyed the Beis Hamikdash and conquered the Beis Hamikdash by the first Beis Hamikdash, so it wasn't the second Beis Hamikdash. So that's the source of why it's observed on Tisha B'Av. Why did Hashem destroy the Beis Hamikdash? So on that we have this Gemara in Masechta Yoma. Mikdash Rishon mipnei ma charav. The first Beis Hamikdash, why was it destroyed? Mipnei shloisha devarim shehayu voi. Because of the three things that were at that time, which the Yidden were over. Avodah Zarah, idol worship, V'gilui Aroyos, immoral behavior, V'shvichus damim, and murder. Avol Mikdash Sheni. But at the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, which is only, right, so there were 70 years in Golus, and that's all there was between the first and when the first was destroyed and the second was started. And we're talking, just to mention, it's in that thing there, that the second Beis Hamikdash was started 3408 and 3404 and 3405, so 2.5, 3 years earlier is the whole story of Purim with Mordechai and Esther. So they were good, right? They were good. So why was the second Beis Hamikdash destroyed? They weren't serving idols or things like that then. Why? And the Gemara explains that. So they were doing good things. So why was it destroyed? So the Gemara answers in Yom Mitnei, as you know, because there was unwarranted hatred. And you know what this teaches you? That unwarranted hatred, and basically most hatred is unwarranted. Keneged shalish averis is equal to 3 averis. Avodah Zarah, idol worship, Gilui Arayis, immoral activity, or Shvichos Damim, and murder of innocent people. That's the reason the first base of Mikdash is destroyed, and the second base of Mikdash is destroyed for unwarranted hatred. So they're obviously equal in power, and that's what it teaches. So it says there that at the time of the first base of Mikdash, they were doing idol worship and immoral activity and murder. So idol worship, if you know any Tanakh, so you read through the whole of Tanakh, all the Nevi'im are just telling them off the whole way through, from very early in the reign of the kings in Yehuda, and certainly in Israel, in the northern kingdom, telling them all about Avodah Zarah. I mean, the whole northern kingdom of Israel was formed for Avodah Zarah. So the first king didn't like it of the northern kingdom, which is at the same time as Shlomo HaMelech's son Rehoboam. So at that same time, Yerovam ben Nevat set up the northern kingdom. He didn't like it that the Yidden were going a little regel to the base of Mikdash, so he said, no more going to the base of Mikdash. He set up roadblocks on the border, and he said, here's a temple, here's an idol, serve this down here in the south. In the north, not convenient, no problem, set you up a temple up there in the north, and you can serve Avodah Zarah up there. So they, right from the beginning, the Nevi'im were telling them off about Avodah Zarah. Right? And the same, eventually also by Yehuda as well, the southern kingdom, by the kings of David and these sons. So that we know. Gilui Arayis, not going to go into, that's also evident. And murder. What cases of murder do we find? So that's the first case I'm going to show you here. It wasn't some sort of knee-jerk reaction, so to speak. Achman understand to say it, but to say it by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this was something that was happening a lot, murder of innocent people. So we said that this first base of Mikdash was destroyed in 3338, already 238 years before, in 3100 exactly. The following story happened, and this is what it says in Eikar Abba. V'hu maskir ovin hitofes, and Hashem, and of course not. And Nebuchadnezzar brings to mind the Averas of the Jewish people, the hitofes, so that they should be caught and snared in these Averas and their punishment come. What Avera is he talking about? It says Ova in singular. This is the Avera which happened with Zechariah. And this is what it's written. And the Spirit of Hashem dressed Zechariah, the son of Yehoiada the Kohen, and he stood above the people. So who is Zechariah ben Yehoiada? Let me explain that. So in his time, the king, his name was Yehoash. He was an incredible individual because he was made king at only 7 years old. And he was made king because the queen of the previous king, the queen who was the consort of his father, the previous king, Chazyahu. So when her husband passed away, she decided she wants to be the queen, and she killed out all of his boys. And at that time, they saw that all the boys were being killed. There's going to be none left over to follow in the line. So the Kohen Gadol of the time, whose name was Yehoiada, and his wife, Yeshivah, they hid this little boy. He was a baby. He was an infant. He was a couple of months old. And they hid him upstairs in the base of Mikdash, on top of the Kodesh Kodashim. As you know, I'm sure you just saw the presentation of Rabbi Leshus, and he would have pointed out, no doubt, that the base of Mikdash building was 3 stories. The bottom story was where the Kodesh, all the areas in the Aron HaKodesh. On top of that was another story. And even on top of that, a 3rd story, and up there is where they hid this little boy, Yehoash. And Yeshivah looked after him, and he had a nursing mother there. Then when he was 7 years old, they crowned him as king, and the wicked Atalia, she was killed, and he took over the throne. And this Yehoiada brought him up like his own son, the Kohen Gadol, and trained him and so forth. Okay, so now he was a king for 41 years. He was a king, he started in, so let's work that out. So that's 3061, right? So 3061 he was the king. That's when he was king, he was 7 years old. And Yehoiada looked after him the whole time. Yehoiada passed away 3090. And at that point, Yehoash was no longer guided by Yehoiada. He became his own individual, and the people thought, wow, this guy is special. He lived in the Kodesh Kadoshim. He's like a Getchker. We have to bow down to him, because anybody goes in the Kol Zohar Kodesh that says anyone who comes into the Kodesh Kadoshim dies immediately. He lived there, and he's like God himself. So he got a big head about himself. And at that time, a lot of the Avodah Zorah began to kick in again. So this is what happened. V'ruach lovshus Zachari ben Yehoiada, Yehoiada's son was a Navi, and he stood above the people. Was he standing on their heads? That that you say is above them. He saw himself as higher than the rest. He felt himself superior. Favos. He was the son-in-law of the king. He was a Kohen Gadol. He was a Navi. He was a Dayan. So his skill medaber gedolet. So Tom gave him red, and he started to speak, really high words. And what are the high words he spoke? This is his nevuah. He was in the Beis Hamikdash, and he was speaking to them, and he said to them, Koy Amar Alikim, so says Hashem, Lama atem oivim es mitzvahs Hashem. Why are you transgressing the mitzvahs Hashem? You're not going to be successful when you're abandoning Hashem. But and he is abandoning you. He has abandoned you, Lashon Rava. And that is Mefarshim say, is the high words, because he's presumed, he didn't even give him a chance to do tshuva, he just said Hashem's abandoned you. It's already a done deal. But Yikshuru Olav, so they all gathered against him, rose up against him, and they stoned him with stones. And over there, that's where it's in Divrei Yom, and where it's mentioned in Malachim, it's at the behest of Yehoash himself, the king. They did it. And they didn't conduct themselves with respect to his blood, not even like the blood of a deer, nor the blood of an antelope. Because it's written about it, the dam of when you shecht an oif, or when you shecht a chaya, the Torah says, "V'shofach es damai," when you spill its blood, v'chisahu be'afa, and cover it with dirt. But over here, when they killed Zechari ben Yehoiada, it was on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. The floor is marble. His blood was right there in the middle of the Beis Hamikdash. And why did this happen? Why did it happen this way, that the blood stayed there, out open? So that Hashem's anger would be aroused to take vengeance against him. I'm just reading, that's what I'm doing, going through the stories of what happened at the time. So Rabbi Yudin Shol, I think I'm just going to say, just take an aside, how do I know this was 3,100? Not a guess, because I've got over here, I'm not going to read all of it. All of the psukim there are just for my reference. I'm not going to go through any of the psukim. But in the psukim afterwards, it says, in one of the psukim, that it was in a year's time afterwards, that the people revolted against Yehoash, and they killed him, and they assassinated him. So it says, a year after this event, that happened, and we know that Yehoash was 40 years a king, because it says Befedish in Tanakh, that's the psukim there. He started 3061, so he stopped being a king 3101, and if that's 1 year later, so obviously that means this whole event happened in 3100. Rabbi Yudin, on second paragraph, Rabbi Yudin Shol Rabbi Acha. Rabbi Yudin asked Rabbi Acha, Heichen Hargu Yisrael Zechariah, where did the Jewish people kill Zechariah? Was it Be'ezras Noshim or Be'ezras Yisrael? Was it in the first courtyard called Ezras Noshim, or was it in that narrow courtyard called Ezras Yisrael further up? Amalei, so he said to him, no, Loi Be'ezras Noshim, Loi Be'ezras Yisrael, was in neither. Ela Be'ezras Kohanim, it was mamish in the Ezras Kohanim of the Beis Hamikdash. And he continued on. They didn't treat his blood even as good as the blood of a deer or of an antelope, except that it's written by them, the shofach hasnami v'yislaba, spill its blood and cover it with dirt. From Halcha, but here, al tzchiach stela. It was on the shiny part of the rock it stayed, right? Like it was marble stones. So it was on a clear, on a shiny rock, and it didn't get absorbed. Kolkach, why did this all event occur? In order that Hashem's anger be aroused to take revenge. Nosati Esdomol Tzchiach Selah placed his blood on the bare rock, And Sheva Averis also Yisrael Ba'isa. Yoim, 7 Averis the Yidden did that day when they killed Zechariah. Hargu Kohen, he has given a Kohen, he has given a Novi, he was a Dayan. Shafko Damnoki was innocent blood. Echilul was Hashem, they desecrated Hashem's name right in the base of the Mikdash. V'timu es Azara, they made the Azara Tomei. And the 7th is these two together. V'yom HaShabbos v'yom Kippurim Hoya. So this is a really grave sin to murder the Novi, leave his blood just lying like that. Now, this had a big impact when on the day of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. It wasn't an event that happened 238 years before, 238 years before, because in that same Midrash Eicha, it tells you this. By the way, I think this story is also in Gittin too, but it's clearer here. The cave in Sha'ala Nebuzradin. Now we learnt right at the beginning, right, that he came in on the 7th of Av and he wreaked havoc over there and burned it in the night. The cave in 3338, the cave in Sha'ala Nebuzradin, when Nebuzradin came up and went into the Beis HaMikdash 238 years later, Hiskal Adon Toises, this blood of Zechariah began to bubble up, began to froth up. And that looked strange to him. Blood in the middle of the ground in the Beis HaMikdash, bubbling. Amalahem. So he asked the Yidden there, Ma tivoi shel dam zeh, what is the nature of this blood? Oh, Amru, so they said to him, this is because dam porim, ve'elim, uchvasim, shahina sheklim. We used to shek there a lot of oxen, a lot of rams, a lot of sheep, and that's the blood of all these korbanos. Okay. Miyad, what did he do to Azradin? He didn't accept what they said. Sholach v'aisi d'mezvachim. He sent for, and they brought to him the blood of animals of sacrifices. And he compared that blood with this blood that was bubbling up. V'lo yidamolei. But it wasn't the same to him. Amalahem. So he said to them, in imrisu mutub, if you tell me what the reason, what this is really about, mutub, okay. But if you don't tell me, Sorikna, I will rake. Let me go over in the back. Sorikna lebisrayu, dehano inchi b'misreke de parazla. I will rake the skin of those people, meaning you guys, with iron rakes. I'll skin you alive. Well, of course, then they had no choice. Amrullah, so they said to him, my name Allah. What can we say to you? Novi hava. The blood here belonged to a Novi. The hava mechiachlan, the hava mechiachlan, that was rebuking us. Komein and ole, so we rose up against him, uktoline, and we murdered him. V'hakama shnei deloy nayach demei, and this is so many years that his blood hasn't rested. 238 years, ain't clean it. So then the Azradin said to them, I'll be able to appease him. They brought before him the Sanhedrin Gedela that was located in the Beis HaMikdash, 71 judges, and Sanhedrin Ketana of 23 judges located in the Beis HaMikdash. And he killed all the judges. Until their blood was flowing on the ground as high as the blood of Zechariah. The Kaim Hashanema, to fulfill what the Pasuk says, Portzu v'domim b'domim nogo. I broke them, they were broken, Porotzu, they were broken, and their blood touched the other blood, referring to the blood of the Sanhedrin members who touched the blood of Zechariah. And even though they came equal, Vadayin Hadon Toisus, but the blood didn't settle, continued to bubble. So then what did he do? Aisu Bachurim Uvesulois. He brought young boys and young girls, Ukdal Ulayim. He killed them. V'loy noch, but the blood didn't stop. It wasn't appeased. Aisi Tinoike Shel Beis Rabin. He brought little boys and little boys from Yeshivah. Ukdal Ulayim, and he killed them. V'loy noch, and it still didn't rest the blood. Aishu Shmoinim Elef Pirchei Kahuna, and might sound as an exaggeration, which sometimes does occur in the Medrash and Gemara from time to time, but I think you know that our Shita is in Chabad, to follow the Rebbe's Shita, and that is that everything's literal unless you're forced to say different. And I must say, I'm just going to put this in as an aside. I mean, a lot of this is hard Hebrew, so you're going to hard Aramaic. So it's not actually in the Gemara. I'm quoting a Medrash here, but that actually there's an art scroll Medrash too, I suppose. But the art scroll Medrash seems to follow just in the Agartha section. I recommend it. Not necessarily the other section, not the halachic sections that you can work out from different forms. It doesn't need to be them, Dafka. But in the Agartha section, the person who's doing it is a mamish, a Yerushalayim, and he always keeps things literal as you can. So I'm going to say it literal, 80,000. Why should I say any different? And especially when it says in other places hundreds and hundreds of thousands, in different other places, millions. 80,000 is the least of it all. So he brought in, and after all of that, he brought 80,000 young Kehanim, and he killed them all. Until their blood reached the same level as the blood of Zechariah Hanavi, and still the blood was bubbling. Omar Huzradin said, Zechariah, Kol Tevim Shobehen Ibadti. Zechariah, all the good ones from them I've killed to sell you. Will you only be satisfied if I kill every single Jew? And he would have done it. He was a murderer. When he said this, immediately the blood of Zechariah settled. But he Shatan at that time, this was Radin, he just killed tens and tens of thousands of Yidden, and how much more throughout the city through the war. He had a thought of tshuva for himself. And he said to himself, if this is what happens when one person like Zechariah ben Yehoiada is killed, he's killed, and what's the revenge? The revenge is tens and tens of thousands of people get killed for this one soul. Hahu Gabra, that person, meaning himself. I didn't just kill one, I've killed tens of thousands of people. Alachas kama v'kama, how much more so that I'm going to get a bad thing's going to happen. So Orak, he fled. Ushtar Padashna, and he sent a ksav, he sent a letter describing how to distribute his property, Levesi, to his household, V'igayer, and he became a convert. He converted to Yiddishkeit. What? And the end of the story in the Gemara is Tana, and we learn Naaman Ger Toshev Hoya. I'm not going to explain who all these people are. Naaman Ger Toshev Hoya, he was a ger, a non-Jewish ger, but a settled ger who kept Sheva Mitzvah Nenev. Nebuzradin Ger Tzedek Hoya. This Nebuzradin was a Ger Tzedek. And Mibnei Vonav Shel Haman Lomdu Torah B'Gnei Rak, Mibnei Vonav Shel Sisra Lomdu Kenekas B'Rishlayim, Mibnei Vonav Shel Sancheir. All of these three are huge enemies that killed many Yidden. They're either they or the descendants, obviously the descendants of them, because they met a horrible death, all three of them. Their descendants converted, and Lom Limdu Torah Barabim, they taught Torah Barabim. Ma'in and Shmai Bertalion. Amazing. By the way, that's that story. So let's move on. So that's a pretty bad situation. We've already done all the dates, so let's move on to the next story. Okay. Fast forward. Here's the Gemara. Talmud Bavli. I don't know what time we started, but you'll tell me when we got to finish. You know, I mean, really, because people are hungry. Okay. So Talmud Bavli, Masechta Megillah. This gives you the comparison of when the dates were, how it relates to the various final kings in Yehuda and with Nebuchadnezzar's reign, who was the destroyer of the Beis Hamikdash. So the Gemara says, Nebuchadnezzar min olam da arboin v'chamesh shnin malach. How do we know that Nebuchadnezzar was a king for 45 years? The Omar Ma, because we learnt elsewhere, haven't found the elsewhere. The Omar Ma, we learnt elsewhere. Golu b'sheva, he caused them to go into Golus in the 7th. Golu b'shmoina, he caused them to go into Golus in the 8th. Golu b'shmoina esrei, he caused them to go into Golus in the 18th. Golu b'tshai esrei, and he caused them to go into Golus in the 19th. And the Gemara teaches this. Anything in italics is my own writing. Everything else is straight from the Gemara, straight from the Medrash text. Golu b'sheva l'kibush Yehoyakim. He caused the first Golus in the reign of Yehoyakim. And the 7th year of the reign of Yehoyakim. Right. Yep, that's 3327. That's the end of Yehoiakim's reign. And how do we work that out? Oh, he's going to say later, give you another figure. Okay. And if you look onto that, if you can work in between this and that phone thing that I got you on the bottom of the first page, towards the bottom, the last few things, it says 3327. Nebuchadnezzar removes King Yehoiakim, who dies or is executed while in chains and given a donkey's burial. At this time, I'm just adding this in. This is my assessment. Doesn't say exactly that, but just from the Seder Psukim and Daniel, I think it's apparent that at this time Daniel, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah are exiled to Babel. Nebuchadnezzar appoints King Yehoiachin, also known as Yechoniah. Nebuchadnezzar changed his name to Yechoniah, son of Yehoiakim, as king of Yehuda at age of 18. He reigned only for 3 months. So let's go back to this Talmud Bavli over here that we're doing. So he says, Golu B'Sheva means this is when he conquered Yehoiakim and got rid of him, 3327, which is also Golus Yehoiachin, the same year, because he only was a king for 3 months, Yehoiachin, his son, also he put him into Golus in 3327. And that is Shishmoinel and Nebuchadnezzar. That is the 8th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. That's how I work out that if that's the 8th year of the reign, so that means he started to be a king in take 8 of 3327. So he's a king in 3319, which is what I've got on that chronology over there. Hard to write a footnote about that because you have to do deductions and so forth. So Golub Yishmenes, and when it says he threw the Yidden into Golus in the 18th year, L'kibush Yehoiakim, that is 18 years after he conquered Yehoiakim, which was actually, that should be 3320. Sorry, yeah. He was conquered in 3320, so 18 years later, which is 3338, the year the base of Pinchas was destroyed, Golus Tzidkiyahu, the last king of the Yidden of the Yehuda, Tzidkiyahu was sent to Golus Shutcha Esrei Nebuchadnezzar, which is the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar. The Omar Ma, because we learned elsewhere, Shana Rishona, the first year, Nebuchadnezzar Kibush Nineveh, he conquered Nineveh. Shnia, the second year, was 3320, he conquered Yehoiakim, the king of Israel, Uksiva Hivash Leishim B'Sheva Shana, and it says, in 37 years of Golus Yehoiakim Melech Yehuda B'Shnayim Hashkrim Osochodesh, V'Esrim V'Chamish L'Chodesh, 37 years later, on the 25th of Adar, Nosa Evel Merodach, Melech Babel, his son, who was Evel Merodach, who was a good king, he took out Yehoiachin from prison. And he brought him out from the prison. It was 37 years. Hari Arbon, so 8 years, plus the 37 years, 8 years in his reign, plus the 37 years he was in prison. So this is 45 years for Nebuchadnezzar. It's a long, convoluted way of getting it, so that's why it's hard to put it in a footnote. Okay, where we go from here? Leave out all those psukim. Let's turn over the page. I'm just going to do this. Obviously there's not going to be enough time to do all of this, no way. But I'm going to quickly read, this part, this Medrash Rabbah Vayikra Rabbah, to show you what happened to Yehoiakim, how cruel and how vicious they were. And then I want to finish off on the famous story that you all know, Kamsa Bar Kamsa, just a brief part of it, and how I heard it from the chief rabbi, Rabbi Yisrael Lau, over 20 years ago, here in the Kimberley. What happened with Yehoiakim? It says he got a burial of a donkey. That's amazing, huh? If you have it on that, I don't know, 4th page, after the psukim. Mikai mitzvah ziva. Who fulfilled the mitzvah of ziva? Yechoniah ben Yehoiakim. He was the one, the second last king who was only a king for 3 months. He fulfilled the mitzvahs of ziva. I'm not even going to be able to get to mention how that is. Amru, they said, and it's there, eventually you can read it yourself. When he went up to destroy Yerushalayim, he sat in the city of Antioch in Syria. Sanhedrin Gedolah went to meet him, and they said to him, is it time for the base of Mikdash to be destroyed? They knew he was going to be doing it. No. Elo Yehoiakim Morabi, Yehoiakim has rebelled against me. Tanu leave it, give him to me and I'll go away. Bo Wetzley, so the people came to Yehoiakim Amalo and said to him, Yehoiakim, Nebuchadnezzar wants you. Amalahan. So he said, Kach, is that what you do, is it? Push off one life to save another life? Are you trying to push my life off? Sacrifice me to save your own life? But it says, don't give back a servant to his master. Actually, I'm going to put the Girsis in the duck because it's better. Isn't this what your fathers did? Yeshivah ben Bichri, who was rebellious against David HaMelech in the time of their revolt of Absalom. It's because he didn't listen to them, because Joab wanted to take him and obviously execute him. Because he wouldn't listen to them. Stop, that's that. Since Yehoiakim didn't listen to them, they stood up, they took Yehoiakim and they lowered him down in a chain down to Nebuchadnezzar. How did they do this? Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar, but Rabbi Nassan, he says, they let him down alive. They set him down alive. Rabbi Shimon, they set him down dead. His voice couldn't be heard anymore. Doesn't mean they literally killed him. I fulfilled both of their words. They let him down living. But he was very delicate. He wasn't used to be treated in such a harsh way. Or maybe and therefore he died at that time. What did Nebuchadnezzar do? They judged him and they took him all around Eretz Yisrael, the Hargor. They killed him. They tore open a donkey and they put his body in the donkey. The burial of a donkey, he will be buried. That was a prophecy of Yirmiyahu. They took his body all around Eretz Yisrael, the Hargu, and they killed him. And they were cutting up small pieces of his body and throwing it to dogs. The burial of a donkey will be buried. What sort of a burial does a donkey get? Don't they feed it to dogs? And this is what the Navi complained against him. It's a posuk in not in Loch, a posuk in Devrei Yom. So wait a second. What did he do so bad that he got such a horrible end? There were 3 Amirayim and they said what he did bad. One says he was wearing shatnez. One said he tried to eliminate the fact that he was circumcised. And they found a tattoo on his body. Now wait a second. Is that what you get for a tattoo or for wearing shatnez? That's a pretty serious sort of a punish for that. So the Radal says he did it. It wasn't so much the actual various. He didn't really want to do those things. He got no benefit out of those things, of shatnez and tattoos, but he did it just to be lahachas Hashem, to anger Hashem. So you angered me, Hashem said, this is what you get. Rabbi Yochanan says what he actually really did. He had relations with his mother, Al-Kolossi, and his daughter-in-law, and on the wife of his father. So he's a pretty bad guy. Rabbi Yochanan said, the general rule is, I'm not going to explain that, you will work it out yourself. That the opening from which he went out, he entered. Rabbi Shiur ben Levi Omar, Al-Shahoisha Binonis B'Yerushalayim, that he set up broken women in Yerushalayim. Mahu Bironi is one of these. Bironi is Bayanin, B'Tzayin, empty and tied up. They were like a gunesh. Shahoilig Esbaleim used to kill their husbands, Ma'anes L'Shem, and have his way with their wives, Machlis Mamoinan, take their money with Tmimoin to his own treasure house. He used to know, and we know that the other meaning of knowing, he used to know those widows. Okay, I'm going to leave that. So he did pretty bad. I just want to go to the end because I think it's topical. Let's go to the last page. Is it the last page? Yeah, just turn it right to the back. That's all about the first base Mikdash. There's plenty more to say there because Yechonia and Tzidkiyahu had very terrible ends, but there was a very positive end at Yechonia. There's a lot of positive things to say too, but I haven't got the time. I just don't want to keep you longer, because I think this is important too. But the lot of positive things are also important, but I want to tell you what I heard from Rabbi Yisrael. Okay, here's the story that everybody learns every year in Tisha B'Av. Why is it written that a man who fears Hashem constantly is happy? But one who hardens his heart. So if you fear Hashem constantly by having Avos Yisrael, then you're going to be happy. If you harden your heart and don't have Avos Yisrael for others, Yipol Barah, bad things happen to you. What is it written? He said, Akamsa Uvar Kamsa. This is to do with the story of Kamsa and son of Kamsa, Chal Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim was destroyed. I'm going to the second paragraph. Kamsa bar Kamsa, Chal Yerushalayim, Kamsa bar Kamsa, Yerushalayim was destroyed. The Hu Gavra, there was a certain person. The Rachamei Kamsa, he had a friend, Kamsa, of Aldavove, and his enemy was Bar Kamsa. Avad Sudosa, he made a meal, he made a feast. Amalei Lashamei, so he's obviously a big veer. So he said to his servant, Zil Aisili Kamsa, go bring me Kamsa, that's my friend. Ozil Aisile Bar Kamsa. But he mistakenly went and brought Bar Kamsa, who's his enemy. Also, so when the rich guy comes into the meal, he comes in, Ashkachay the Halayosef. He sees that he's sitting there. Amalei. So he says to him, Mirti Hahu Gavro, meaning this guy, he says to Bar Kamsa, that man, meaning you Bar Kamsa, Bal Devovada Hu Gavrohu. You're the enemy of that other man, meaning myself. You're my enemy. My B'Isahaf, what are you doing here? Kumplate, get up and get out. Amalei, so he didn't want to be embarrassed. So he said, since I've already come, Shavkan, just let me stay here quietly. I won't do anything. I'll pay you whatever I eat and drink. Amalei, so this rich guy said, no way. You have to get out. Amalei, he said, I'll give you half the cost of this huge meal. Just let me stay. Amalei, no. Amalei, I'll give you the whole cost of this meal. Amalei, not the bide. He took him, picked him up, grabbed him up in his hands. The oikme stood him up, and he basically threw him out. Amar, so this Bar Kamsa said to himself, since there were rabbis at this meal, they never didn't protest. That they were happy about this, that I should get so badly embarrassed. I'm going to slander them in the house of the king. He went to the Caesar, either the Caesar in Rome or the Roman governor in Israel. The Jews have rebelled against you. Amalei, he said to me, who says? Amalei, I can prove it. Shadal hu kurbana, send them a carbon. See if they will offer it. Also, Shadabide Aglatulsi, he sent in his hand a very high quality, a fattened ox, or a third-born ox, or a 3-year-old ox, calf. Bahadi de Kosi, and whilst he was coming, while nobody was noticing, Shodabe Muma, this Bar Kamsa, put a mum in this calf. Benivs Chosaim, in its upper lip. The Amul, and some say Bedukin Shaba'ayin, in the covering of his eye. Either the internal covering or the external covering. Dukhta Dilidam Habamuma, a place which for us, Yidden, that's a mum, you can't bring it up. But for them, love mumahu. That's not a mum, too minor, they wouldn't even think about it. So the Rabbanan thought we better offer it up to keep peace with the king, otherwise he might get angry, even though it's got this small mum, we should do it because otherwise he might get angry and kill us. Schari ben Avkula said to them, people will say, if you offer this up, people will say, you can bring up a Balmum on the Mizbech. They'll presume that you can do that with any korban. So then, Savur the Mikale, they thought they're going to kill Bar Kamsa. The Lelezer said he shouldn't be a master and go and tell the Caesar what's happened, and that will lead to them being killed. No. People will say, people will put a mum in kochim, get killed. And that's not so, it's just a lie. Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, in Vasanusi shall Rabbi Zachari ben Avkulas, the humility of Rabbi Zachari ben Avkulas, through that, so they didn't offer it up. The Caesar was upset and sent the king, as the story goes on, sent a general, and they destroyed Jerusalem. And so the end of the story is, Amar Rabbi Yochanan through his humility of Zachari, the son of Avkulas, they destroyed our burnt our palace, threw us out of Golis. I'm not going to go to the other things down the bottom. What did I hear from Rabbi Lau? Rabbi Lau came here when he was the chief rabbi, and he spoke in Kimberley, and he spoke to a group of Israelis. So I went to hear him, and he's got such a beautiful speaking voice, and his Hebrew is so clear that even I'm not so good at understanding Hebrew spoken. I can understand all that he said, and this is what he said. He said, and Rashi says, in Vasanusai, it means sablanusai, his patience, that he didn't want that Bar Kamsa killed. So this is what he said. What does it mean here that the Gemara says, the humility in Vasanusai of Rabbi Zachari ben Avkulas, all the base of Mikdash was destroyed? What humility is it? Sablanusai showed the patience of the tolerance of Rabbi Zachari ben Avkulas. Kapdanusai, his particularness caused it. What is Invasanusai? What is his humility? And this is what he said. He said, what was the point of Rabbi Zachari ben Avkulas? He was too humble. Ma yomru. What will people say? Yomru, people will say that for putting a moving culture you get killed. People will say you will bring a korban. He was worried what people will say. He was too humble. And because he was worried about what will people say, therefore he stopped the Chachamim, and the Chachamim had to defer to him. And they deferred to him, and they didn't offer the korban, and they didn't kill him, and as a result, the whole story occurred. So this time of Ma'yomu Habriyos, he said, what will people say to this conduct leads to your destruction. And I always kept it in the back of my mind, and I see it now, just this week. You know, I just came back from Eretz Yisrael a few weeks ago. I was at a wedding on Rosh Chodesh Tammuz. I came back just before Shabbos Tammuz. And I was just reading in the paper, and I went down south, like a lot of people go on a trip. And we saw on a tour of all the terrible things that are there. And I just saw, I always can't stand the reporting of what happens in Eretz Yisrael. It always makes you feel so bad. And this week, I saw that the latest headline was, Israel has bombed a school in Gaza and killed like 19 and numerous people. So you get to thinking to yourself, bombed a school? Wait a sec, they're in the middle of a war. What do you think? There's classes going on there. There's teachers and classes there. There's no classes there. What is it really? It's a school, maybe before Todd Hampton might have been a school, but right now it's a terrorist hideout, right? It's a hideout where they go and hide in the school. So they don't call it a terrorist hideout. They call it a school because that's what it was a year ago. So it makes us look bad. And then in a crazy sort of a publication, in the Yeshivah, they know the names of the people they killed. And it lists the 19 people, all Hamas members. These are the ones who were killed in this school, really terrorist hideout. So I think that this has got a lot of validity, this Ma'yomu Habriyos. What do you worry what people are thinking? That through that the base of Mikdash was destroyed. Don't worry that the paper says it's a school. You know it's not a school. And don't worry that she says whatever she says, this Rosh Marusha, our foreign minister, whatever she says, don't be involved in what she says. Because what she's saying, she's from Malaysia. Malaysia, let's face it, Malaysia does not acknowledge Israel. It doesn't allow an Israeli embassy. Israelis are not allowed to travel there. So that's where she's born. That's where she comes from. What do you expect from her? I don't expect any different. But just know what it is. Don't be nisbal from what they say. Don't be nisbal, my Yom Rabbi, as Rabbi Lau said, because that can only lead to trouble. So I hope that the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael remain strong, and they really need to be strong in this latest situation that's happening that seems to be Rahman al-Islam connected to Tisha B'Av. Even the Iranians know about Tisha B'Av. So we all wish for them that Mashiach should come today and immediately, and that everything that's happening in Eretz Yisrael should only be good. B'toiv v'nir v'niglo b'kor mamash. Correct.